Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 837B. And today's date is December 8th, 2015. And the title of the episode is The U.S. Government Central Bankers Are Preparing for Another False Flag Event. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, we realize Obama has stated many times that his mission is to remove the weapons of the people. And he will go and do whatever he needs to do to get the guns away from the people, which means more false flags, which means more mass shootings, which means he's going to ramp them up because he has, 9 months left to do this. So we're going to see many more false flag events occur. And not just for gun control, to bring us into war. But what's very interesting is that the New York Times, the editorial board, took their plea for gun bans to the front page on Saturday, calling our nation's inaction on gun control a moral outrage and a national disgrace. And they are telling the American people to give up their weapons for the good of their fellow citizens. Well, I'm sorry. We have a right to own and carry weapons. The Second Amendment allows us to do this. If the government would like to remove the rights that we have, of course, these are rights that we are born with, so can they really be removed? No. But to remove an amendment, they just can't create a law. They can't just beg people to do it. The people have to decide and come together and say, okay, let's change this. And what they need to do is they have to have a majority of the states do this. But when you look at the poll, which is done by Gallup, which is a people's poll, and we're not looking at the government polls, because when you look at the governmental polls, those pollsters are paid. The corporate media polls are paid for by the government. But when you look at Gallup, they asked a question, and this basically is the support for ban on possession of handguns from 1959 to 2015. And the question is as follows. Do you think there should or should not be a law that would ban the possession of handguns except by the police and other authorized persons? Now, there's two answers. That the guns should be banned and should not be banned. Well, in 2015, 72% said no. We should not ban handguns. Everyone has the right to have them. 27% said yes, it should be banned. So right now the people are saying that people have the right to have weapons. And actually what's very interesting, from the year 1980, this percentage has gone up. Back in 1980, it was around 51%. 89, it was at 59%. 98, it was at 62%. 2010, it was at 71%, and now we're up to 72%. So whatever the government is doing, they're having the opposite effect. Actually, every time they have this false flag event, they show a mass shooter, more people purchase weapons. Because that makes sense to people. Wait a minute, there's people running around with weapons? Then I need a weapon to protect myself. Everyone should have a weapon to protect themselves. And if they're using the story that there are terrorists running around in this country, why wouldn't you want to protect yourself from the terrorists? Why would you hand your gun in? It makes no sense. This is when we need to bring common sense into the formula. The government common sense makes no sense. The everyday person's common sense makes perfect sense. Wait, shooters? Terrorists? And if you believe their official story, I need a weapon. I need to protect my family. I'm not getting caught up in this where I have a pair of scissors and I have to go around stabbing someone that has a weapon. That makes no sense. But of course, the government wants you to think the other way. There's mass shootings. We need to get rid of the weapons to make everyone safe. But we know for a fact criminals always find a way to get things illegally. Well, let me say, drugs are illegal. Cocaine, heroin. We don't see any of that on the streets. Oh, wait, we do. During the Prohibition times, alcohol was illegal. Did we see that? Oh, wait, yes, they smuggled that in the black market. Well, the law-abiding citizens, it was hard for them to get it, except if they went to the black market. So all of this talk is not going to stop those people that really want to get it. And once those people have the weapons, and the law-abiding citizen doesn't have the weapons, they're open to more crime, more killing, and everything else. Now, there are 4 former Air Force drone operators that turned whistleblowers, and they went public this week to let everyone know about what has been going on with drones, that they've been killing innocent people, and they were sick and tired of this. And this was done through a documentary called Drone. And when they went public this week, their credit cards and bank accounts were frozen by the government. This was done despite the fact they'd done nothing wrong, and they haven't been charged with anything. Everything was just frozen. Michael Haas, Brandon Bryant, Sion Westmoreland, and Stephen Lewis. And they served as drone operators in the U.S. Air Force, and they were giving detailed accounts of the widespread corruption and institutionalized indifference to civilian casualties that characterized the program. Some of those disclosures were made in the recent documentary, like I said, in Drone. And they came to the realization that they were just killing innocent people. And as they did this, people were getting angry, and they were getting the feeling of hatred from the surrounding people. And this is why the countries and the people of these countries don't like the U.S. Well, not the people specifically, but the government of the United States. And the administration and its predators, they built this drone program, and it is one of the most devastating driving forces for the destabilization around the world, where people in these countries are rising up, pushing the U.S. out of their countries. And every time the U.S. comes in and uses drones on the civilians, because you have to remember how this works, Al-Qaeda in each one of these countries refers to the people of the country, because this is how it's done. Al-Qaeda is the terrorist group when they need to get into a country. We have to remove Al-Qaeda. We have to get them. Once the puppet government is in and installed in that country, the people who do not agree with the new U.S. puppet government, they're called Al-Qaeda because of the authorization for war going back during the Iraqi war. That authorization allows them to go after terrorism, especially Al-Qaeda, and they're authorized to use drones on these people, and most of these people are just civilians. For example, in Ukraine, when we had the coup d'etat, the U.S. government paid $5 billion to switch out the government. All those people that did not agree with the new puppet government, they were labeled as terrorists. One day they were everyday citizens of Ukraine, and now those people who wanted to fight back against this regime change, they were labeled terrorists. And this is what we see all across the Middle East, Ukraine, and many other countries. Now, the U.S. has been provoking Russia and China. I mean, they've been provoking Russia in Ukraine, in Syria. They want a war. They've been provoking China in the Pacific, around the Spratly Islands, shelling the warships around there, flying planes over the Spratly Islands. And they're going to continually do this until they hit a nerve where one of these countries actually does something. And if they don't do something, it will be a false flag where the United States will turn around and say they actually did it. But they're taking this to the next step. Singapore right now has permitted a U.S. spy aircraft to conduct surveillance operations from its territory to support maritime security efforts, while keeping a close watch on Beijing's activities in the South China Sea. Under the agreement reached by Washington and Singapore, the American P-8 Poseidon military aircraft will be deployed to Singapore later this month to fly in this region. And all of this is being done to continually provoke China. And they're going to ramp this up as time goes on because they need this war. They're desperate for it. Now, the IMF needs to keep Ukraine funded. And right now, Ukraine doesn't have the funds to pay back the $3 billion worth of bonds that they owe Russia. And under the IMF laws, and their lending rules, I should say, they can't lend to a country that will be in default. So what they'll do is they'll just change their rules. And now they can lend to a country that is in default. So basically what they're telling us is that Ukraine is going to default on the $3 billion. And the IMF will keep them funded and keep them in debt. Of course, now I guess they're going to have to do this to every country and put more and more countries into debt. So all bets are off. They need to keep the IMF, the Ukraine funded because they're getting ready for a major offensive. And this is why they cannot stop funding the Kiev government. Biden is still out there. And one of his other statements is that he has assured Ukraine lawmakers that the U.S. will only step up pressure on Moscow if Russian aggression continues. Well, there is no Russian aggression. The aggression is coming from Kiev, from the United States. Crimea right now, after Ukraine knocked out its power and Russia basically took a cable, ran it from Russia into Crimea. They've restored full power to Crimea. And now they're linked up to Russia. But of course, the corporate media is saying that Ukraine restored the power. No, they didn't. It was Russia who restored the power. Now, the reports are coming out from the Donbass area saying that Kiev, their forces have captured 7 villages in the buffer zone separating the conflicting sides in eastern Ukraine. They have already informed the OSCE about this, that, yeah, they just came in and captured the villages. Because what they're doing, they're positioning themselves. They're bringing the military assets up to the line. They've already brought it up to Crimea. They have already brought it up to the contact line. They're moving closer and closer in to the region because they're getting ready for a major offensive. Now, Russia understands that the U.S. was going to eventually do this. They know eventually that this is going to be a world war. Putin has been doing whatever he possibly can to keep the peace. Because if he really wanted war, he would have let it happen back in 2013. He would have said, okay, you know what? Let the U.S. planes fly in. Let them go into Syria. Russia then would make their move and defend Assad. But that's not what happened. He could have let it happen in Ukraine. He could have brought in his forces. They could have went out on an all-out war. But instead, he put forth the Minsk II ceasefire agreement. And now he realizes that he's running out of time. He sees what the private Western central bankers are doing. And basically, right now, Russia is putting the S-400 missile system in the Arctic region, north of the polar circle. And they're protecting the entire north area of Russia now with S-400 missiles. Cyprus is going to let Russian warplanes use its airports. They will be permitted to make emergency landings and takeoffs to evacuate Russian nationals if necessary from different locations. How very interesting that they're setting up this deal. Cyber Berkut has intercepted information that Ukraine is selling high explosive fragmentation bombs to Qatar for $2,100 each. I wonder what they're planning to do with these. And Turkey, as we know, they have invaded Iraq. The presence of Turkish forces on the territory of Iraq, they do not have the permission of the Iraqi authorities. Russia is saying this is completely unacceptable. The Prime Minister of Iraq has said, remove your troops. So right now, Turkey has their troops in there. They have 25 tanks in Iraq. And the Prime Minister is saying this is completely unacceptable. We do not want this here. So Turkey said, okay, we will halt the deployment of troops inside of Iraq, but we're not removing the tanks or the troops from Iraq. Now, Iraq has every right to go in and fire at the Turkish troops, just like Turkey had every right to fire at the Russian jet, which they say crossed into their territory. Now, of course, Iraq most likely is not going to do this. And we know that the Russian jet was in Syrian airspace. But we always notice they talk out of two sides of their mouths. And we see right now the Iraqi forces, they've taken back a large part of Ramadi, and the Islamic State is being pushed out. And we know for a fact that Turkey, the United States, they want their proxy army in Ramadi. And this is why, one of the reasons why Turkey is bringing in forces. This is why the U.S. is bringing in special op teams. This is why the U.S. is in combat. They're really fighting not the Islamic State, but the Iraqis, the people of Iraq, to make sure that their proxy army is safe. Greece has seized a tanker, Haddad 1, and it was concealing 5,000 shotguns, and it was headed towards Libya. They said they have 14 containers carried by the Bolivian vessel, and there were 500,000 rounds of ammunition, 5,000 shotguns. And where were these headed? Well, they come to find out that these were headed to the city of Sirte in Libya, where the Islamic State is. And they were found at the bottom of the containers, concealed by a load of furniture, including drawers, cupboards, and a layer of gymnastic mats. And they were discovered, and now Greece is holding them. And this vessel is basically currently banned from any European port under the Paris Memorandum, because they've had many, many problems with smuggling and other laws that they violated. Paperwork was not in order, and we see they're continually doing this. So we can see already, I'm just curious of where these weapons actually came from. Jordan, Turkey, U.S. helping out in this. Now, the U.S. is denying that they bombed Assad's forces. They're saying, no, Russia did it. Now, we know this is absolutely fake, phony, and false. Russia is in contact with Assad. Russia knows where the troops are. Russia knows exactly who they're going to hit, when they're going to hit it. And one of the pieces of evidence that shows that it wasn't a mistake or a mishap is that there were 9 missiles that were used when they hit the camp. So this wasn't just a mistake of one bomb hitting the area. This was on purpose. And a lot of contacts are saying that this was the coalition forces. And it's very interesting that Assad's forces are being killed in mysterious airstrikes near the Islamic State oil fields. Whenever they get close to it, they hit Syria's armed forces. Very interesting. Now, the U.S. is being looked at right now because there were U.S. warplanes that attacked a Syrian village of Al-Khan. And basically, the report is saying that they killed 36 civilians. 36 people. And of them, there were about 12 civilians that were killed. And right now, the U.S. is saying no comment on this. And we can see already from Afghanistan when they went ahead and they bombed and shot up a hospital, that, yeah, most likely they did do this. So the whole story of them not hitting the convoys because there's civilians on there, we know that's completely fake, phony, and false. Because we can see by Saudi Arabia, which is the proxy army of the United States, they're hitting over 100 hospitals. They don't care about the civilians. They only care about making the people suffer to accept the puppet government. Now, Russia has fired their first missile from a submarine in the Mediterranean, and they hit their targets in Syria. The 3M-54 caliber missile was launched from the Kilo-class diesel electric submarine Rostov-on-Don, and they can say they hit a warehouse of ammunition, a mine production plant, and completely destroyed it. Now, the U.S. is trying to get other nations into the fight. U.S. Chairman of Joint Chiefs Staff General Joseph Dunford says the special operation forces from other nations are going to join in the fight of the Islamic State. He can't talk about which countries are bringing in troops, but we can see what's happening right now. They're bringing in coalition forces from Europe. I mean, we know Germany, France, the UK are all involved. They're trying to get more involved in this to create a force. We already know thousands upon thousands of troops are being trained in Jordan to create a corridor to go right into Syria to get Assad. We can see that everything is being built up right now. They are getting ready. They're getting prepared to go all out. Now, we understand the U.S., the European nations, the private Western central bankers, they need to convince the population that this is a war and we need to get involved. We need more troops on the ground. We need more bombers. We need more weapons. So at this point, going forward, they are planning additional false flags. And it's not just going to be about pushing the authorization for war to fight Russia. It's going to be about getting the weapons away from the people, because we have to remember the president only has 9 or so months left to do this. Now, if he can create an event before that time period, before the elections, or right before the elections, and the event is so bad that he has to declare martial law, that he has to put the country under a state of emergency, he might stay president at this point. It's unusual. It's something that hasn't been done. But if we are at war and the U.S., they can convince the people that we're being attacked by either Russia or the Islamic State or any other country, he could make the case where he stays in power. Now, I'm not saying that the next president is going to be any better, because guess what? They don't really run the country. They're just the spokespeople for the people who are actually running the country. But at that point, we can see already that they're ready to move this forward. They're ready to put the plans in motion. The economy is collapsing. Everything is getting prepared for the next phase. And we're going to see many more false flags to convince everyone that this is where we're headed, to be afraid, to scare us, the fear-mongering. It's actually the government that's doing this, who's doing all this fear-mongering. It's actually the government is making everyone worried about weapons. It's actually the government that's saying the Islamic State is a terrorist organization and they're coming to get us. Because we all know the Islamic State is their proxy army. We all know that these are false flags, just like San Bernardino. Because in any case that you're trying to prove and you're trying to convict someone or say someone did this, there can be no reasonable doubt. And guess what? In all of these cases, there's so much reasonable doubt. There's so many different pieces of evidence that don't make sense that anyone sitting on a jury, if these people were alive, I'm talking about a fair jury, not a fixed jury, they would not be convicted of this. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.